Hello and welcome to the Artists Make Money podcast, where artists share their thoughts and feelings about money. I am your host, Vivienne Egan. I'm an interactive theatre and comedy producer, podcaster and freelance business writer, and I love hearing about all the unique ways artists create their incomes. Today's guest is stand-up comedian and pharmacist Ola Labib. She is the UK's only Black Muslim female Sudanese comic. That is only so far. I'm sure there will be more in the future. We talked about juggling the comedy industry with an NHS job, the financial and family responsibilities of having an immigrant background, Ola's big dreams for charitable causes, and pushing through the exhaustion of having a taxing full-time job to make your creative dreams come true. I really loved this episode with Ola. If you listen to the end, we both almost cried. It was very emotional. So I really hope you enjoy it too. This episode of Artists Make Money is brought to you by our friends at Side Hustle Sites. They make designer flat pack websites, like the IKEA of websites, with helpful instructions and guides for how to make your website look really great. It is cheaper than Squarespace, and their templates are actually specialized to particular jobs. So they've got templates for theatre professionals and for freelance writers. I'm actually about to use them to build my freelance writing website because I don't have one. Or they can actually design you a website from scratch, which they did for me on the Artists Make Money website. If you sign up via sidehustle-sites.com/AMM, I will link that in the show notes, you will get a fantastic professional looking website and your first month subscription free and the second month half price. That is just for Artists Make Money listeners. On with the show. Hi Ola, thank you so much for being on Artists Make Money. Would you like to tell the people who you are and what you do?
So my name is Ola Labib. I am a comedian and I am a pharmacist. So I've got two jobs at the moment. That is me.
Excellent. And you say at the moment, are you working on making the comedy a full-time thing?
Let's be honest, if someone has a choice between making people laugh and enjoying it or working in the NHS, not there's anything wrong with working in the NHS, we applaud you and all that, but
Sure. Understood. So how long have you been doing comedy?
what day is it today? Monday. Saturday was 2 years anniversary to my first ever open mic.
Amazing. And you have come a very long way in a very short time. Because
Yeah.
you were on the BBC recently.
Yes, the BBC Two Funny Festival. Yeah, crazy. I didn't know it was my 2 year comedy anniversary until the guy that hosted the open mic that I went to 2 years ago sent it to me, and he was like, "Oh, look, this is the post this is the post that I put up saying I'm on my way to the comedy gig and this and that." And I was just like, I would never in a million years, when I was stood in that grubby, dirty, smelly pub, ever think that in 2 years I would be where I am. Never, ever, 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 ever. But my mother always says, if you put hard work into something, it will always come out. The same amount of effort you put in, it will be represented at the other end. It's an Arabic saying. I can't say it in English, but you get the gist.
Can you say it in Arabic?
I'm not even going to embarrass myself like that.
Okay. We get the gist, I think. I think that's very wise advice because, I mean, I think one of the things, like how we found each other was, I think, on Instagram, because you interviewed a mutual friend, Tucson Douglas, on your
I love Tucson.
IGTV. I know, he's so great. But I noticed just you are so committed to putting out content, like your energy for it is really, like you put a lot of energy in and clearly it is coming out. And I thought that really stood out to me in terms of like, what would I what advice would I give to someone? I'd be like, look at what Ola's doing. She's like working
Ah,
hard, she's networking, like she's going on gigs all the time. She's making her own content all the time. Like, what else have you done that you think has like created that success?
I really think it's down to hard work. I really do. So I was a full-time pharmacist and I was a full-time clinical pharmacist. So I was ward-based, and I used to do really long hours naturally. Like, if your job in the NHS is 9 to 5 and you work in a hospital, you never finish at 5 o'clock. That doesn't exist. That's more an aim rather than an end time. So I would gig on days that I've worked long shifts. So I'd finish at, like, say, 6 o'clock. I was based in Manchester. I was based in Wigan and Liverpool. So I would have a gig in Yorkshire, which was like 50 something miles away. I'd finish my shift, drive straight to the gig, get there like maybe 20 minutes before, like hype myself up, do my set, then drive all the way back. And I'd have work like 7 o'clock in the morning the next day. And that's just the reality of it. And I really believe, like, I used to be exhausted. Sometimes I would really like feel that I didn't have the energy. I'd be exhausted. And what I tell people, it's not just the physical energy. I work on like oncology wards where I'm surrounded by like death, and I'm surrounded by, terminal illnesses, and I'm surrounded by families crying. I'm surrounded by all of this. And sometimes, like, after a day at work, I've mentioned this before. There was a time where I had a gig, and it was for a really like well-known promoter in the northwest called Silky. I don't know if you've heard of him. And I was like really pumped for it and stuff like that. And I had a shift where a patient that I had, who was really young, like 35 years old, she was terminal and she passed that day. And I was just like, I felt sick. And the idea that I was going to stand in front of people to make them laugh after feeling like that, I just felt like I wasn't up for it. But then I thought, what if I don't get this opportunity again? And I think people don't see that the hard work is not necessarily the hours, because I need the hours to pay my bills, but I feel like it's the emotional side of it as well. Having a job that practically clashes with comedy was really hard, and I thought that would be my end point. That would probably be the reason for my failure. But my mum's quote always came back: whatever work you put in, you'll come out. And I think it's due to hard work. I know a lot of people, and I've said this a million times, are like, oh, Ola's successful because she's a niche.
No, Ola's successful because she's very funny.
Oh, thanks, mate. But yeah, you get that a lot. Oh, you're a niche. Oh, you're so lucky. You tick all the boxes. You tick all the boxes. I was like, no, mate. It's because you're not funny. That's the box you're missing.
Yes, that's like the first box that you have to tick. Like,
yeah, exactly.
No one's going to be successful if they're not funny. In comedy, you can be unfunny and be successful in other things.
Exactly, you can be.
What was the first time you got paid for a comedy gig? How did that feel?
When did I get paid for a comedy gig? It was way, way, way later.
Yeah.
When did I get paid for a comedy gig? I did a gig for someone in Manchester. That must have been a year into it, and it was just to cover expenses. It was a tenner or 15 quid. But is that even classified as a payment? It didn't even cover my expenses, to be honest.
Well, maybe a better question is, how did it feel to get paid by the BBC? For people listening, Ola is mouthing things at the camera. We're on a Zoom call, and it sounds incredible. That's how it felt.
It was all about the experience and the opportunity.
So not about the money. Is it bad money?
Well, if it was about the money,
She's mouthing things again and doing a across the.
I don't want to get in trouble. I want to be on the BBC again.
All right. Well, you just come and watch the YouTube video if you're listening.
And you have to be very good lip readers as well.
You'll get the vibe. You'll get the vibe. Okay. So look, maybe it's not all that, but right. Oh well.
You don't start making money significantly until people know who you are, because nobody wants to take, and I would be the same if I had a comedy venue and I hear that, oh, Viv is a funny comedian. It's just word of mouth. I don't know that. So I would say, you know what? How about you come? I want to see you. I won't pay you a lot. Maybe just cover your expenses. But if you're good, next time I'll pay you the full shebang. That's the stage I'm at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's kind of tricky though. It's frustrating because it's still like your time and your craft, and like people can also see, there are videos, It's like, so I do writing on the side of my like comedy producing work, and like there's a big thing if you're a freelance writer that people be like, can you do a test article, like an unpaid test? And I'm like, no, you can read the many articles I've written before to see if you like what I do, or if I can do what I say I do. And I don't generally do unpaid writing tests, but I guess it is so different in comedy, isn't it? Because everyone wants to be a comedian.
Exactly. So it is a really competitive market. And to be honest, like, don't quote me in this, because later on, if it happens, I'll be like, excuse me. But if Live at the Apollo, for example, said, oh, we want you to do 20 minutes, but we'll only pay for your expenses, I don't think I would say no, because you have to think like all these unpaid gigs will lead to better things. Like I'm getting paid gigs, but that's as a result of promoters being at unpaid gig and seeing me. Do you know what I mean? So, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be doing unpaid gigs for the next whatever. I'm not going to take every unpaid gig there is. You've got to balance it a little bit. You have to know your worth. I've got a fantastic manager. She's the best ever in the whole wide world. I love her. But she's taught me my worth. She was like, look, I know your worth. Like she would never put me towards something unless she knows it will benefit me. And there's times where I'm like, oh, should I do it? Should I not? And if she tells me do it, I'll be like, okay, she knows best. And she's always been 110 bazillion% right. And it's always led to better things. So I just have to trust the energy, trust my manager, and trust myself. And, sometimes you've got to show people what you can do before they start offering services. Like if you see, I don't know, an ice cream cone with ice cream on top that looks like turd, looks like someone's taken a massive shit on an ice cream cone, you're not going to eat it. You're going to be like, oh, I don't know, it doesn't look appealing, this and that. But if somebody else tries it and says, oh, you know what, it's actually really good, then you're more likely to try it once without paying for it because it looks gross. And if you think it's good, the next you'd want it again and then you'd pay for it. Don't know why I went for that analogy. Maybe because I'm fasting and I'm thinking of ice cream.
Yes, for anyone listening in, it is 10 days to the end of Ramadan.
It's the final countdown.
That's actually such a good analogy. And I think there is, it's that really hard thing to balance that you exactly like described, regardless with an unusual metaphor, but like that if you're at that stage where you're like just kind of still emerging, trying to figure stuff out, there is a bunch of stuff you do have to do for free, and it's just a reality of working in a creative industry. But it's knowing when to start charging or when you're being like sort of taken for a ride. to be like, no, I'm not going to do that one. But it sounds like you've got someone really knowledgeable in your corner.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, look at it this way. I started 2 years ago, and I'm at a place now where I feel beyond blessed, and it is down to them 100%. So I completely trust in I trust in their experience, and I trust in their knowledge, and I trust in their trust in me. So yeah, like no, I'm in a really good position. I've got amazing things coming up that never in a million years, did I think it would happen, let alone this quickly. I've had my first TV debut, and people have seen me already. Two TV debuts, and people have seen me already. And yeah, I'm hoping that there's more and more to come. But I feel like, I know at the moment, because of what I said to you earlier, it's a bit difficult to be in a comedy mode, but I do feel that I try and put a lot more in, because I don't have the time. Like, I don't want to say so much envy, but a lot of comedians will, I know, like, even ones that are not even that successful, they'll work part-time, so the rest of their hours is spent like on comedy and stuff. But I feel, as much as I want to do that, I'm not at a financial stage right now to drop hours. So I think people kind of see, oh, she's doing this, she's doing that, oh, this and that. But I don't think well, I'm sure some people do, but some people just don't get like how hard it is, like working a long shift, and having a gig that they went, oh, we want these requirements, or oh, can she write a new 10-minute set for this, and to wake up, go to work, come back, sort everything out in the house, cook, eat, wash up. It gives you like 2-3 hours in the evening. And sometimes you're just like, you've had such a long, miserable day that the idea of writing something funny is bloody exhausting. It's just so exhausting. But like, coming from an immigrant background, our financial responsibilities are very different from a lot of people. And I think a lot of people who have a similar background to me will understand what I mean. My money is not just for me. I don't see it as just for me. I see it as money that I'm making for my family, not only my family here, my family back home. I want my family to be comfortable. We come from a very poor, corrupt country. As much as I love my homeland, I love my culture, I love everything about it, but it's the reality. We are a poor country, so there are additional needs back home. And you try and give as much, and people don't talk about it, and I know why they don't, because charity is something that's between you and that person. So I'm not saying this to say, oh, well, look at me, I send money back home. No, it's not like a boastful thing. I'm just saying, like, a lot of people are like, oh, Ola, why don't you drop your hours? And I want to, when I get to the stage when I can.
Yeah.
But right now, financially, I just don't. I'm not in a place where I can do that. So I'm just working really hard to try and balance it, and I'm just waiting for that big deal where I can not quit my job, but like reduce my hours at least.
Yeah, totally. And that's such I think when there's a lot of talk about how sort of middle class the arts are, and how white they are, and comedy as well. And I think that is such an important piece that people don't recognize as a barrier. It's like, well, I can't just, like so many people I know, they just have this sort of a safety net in terms of like their parents will look after them or whatever, or they just have to worry about themselves, and it's just like, as long as I can make enough money to pay my rent and get by, that's fine. And there's sort of, it's one of those invisible barriers that an immigrant family has, as you say, different financial responsibilities. It's like, there's a much broader, like you're part of your money is part of a community of like care and support. And it's such an important thing to consider in terms of like, how are more people from different backgrounds going to be able to access comedy when so many of them have all these different kinds of financial responsibilities. Speaking of being from an immigrant family as well, just before we started recording, you were saying about the lessons that your dad got taught when he first came from Sudan to the UK about money. And that was so interesting. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so we've always been told, I didn't, you don't really think about it, but my dad's always told us, you know, like, over here, people, you don't ask someone how much money they make, and don't tell people how much you make. It's like a rule of thumb. Like, I get it. If someone randomly came up to me, so, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a pharmacist. Oh, and how much do you make? I'll be like, Google it. But I'm very well. I work for the NHS, so you can literally Google NHS banding and see how much a band 7 pharmacist costs, and it's literally there for you. So for me, I don't really care. The comedians, I feel, don't talk about how much money they get paid for certain gigs. I've only got one. Well, I've got a few comedian friends, but there's one in particular, three in particular that are quite open. And it's not because I want to be like, oh, how much do you get? No. Because sometimes you'll get the same gig, and you want to make sure that they're not paying you less. So I'll be like, oh, I'm doing this next week, and they'll be like, oh, well, I did that a month ago, and I wouldn't even ask. They'll be like, by the way, this is how much they paid me. How much did they offer you? And I'm like, oh, they offered me half of that. Well, I think maybe you should speak to them, and blah, like that kind of thing. And they're the most amazing people, because there's some people that want you to succeed, and there's some people that don't, and they're the kind of people that want you to succeed. So yeah, and I think it's what you do with your money as well. Like, like, obviously I'm Muslim, and I do believe that if you do something good, whether it's now or later, you will get rewarded for it. But I think if it's kind of the intentions of what you want to kind of do with your money as well, I think that plays a big part in it. I think it plays a big part in everything, and it all comes down to, if you work hard, and if you work hard for your money, it will always come back to you. I'm going to give an example that's nothing comedy related at all. Okay. I'm dumb, very dumb. A few years ago, I wanted to buy a car, and it was an amazing car, and the guy was like, oh, it's for 3,000. I was like, is that it? 3,000 is a lot of money, but for that car, I was like, bloody hell. And at that point, I was a band 6 pharmacist, and this was in 2014. It was my first hospital job, and back then a band 6 pharmacist got paid like 21,000 or 22,000 pounds a year before tax, which is nothing, considering, like, I worked in Bournemouth, where rent prices are horrific, living expenses. So, to save 3,000 pounds took like 2-3 years. But I really needed a car. So anyways, I was like, is that it? This and that. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll take it. So the guy didn't give me the car. He was like, right, I need to service it and stuff. So I need to get the payment first, and then you can come pick it up, or I'll deliver it to you. I was like, okay, fine, perfect. So I transferred him the 3,000. Next day, called him, line cut. Couldn't get hold of him. Calling and trying to get this and trying to get that, and this and that and this and that and this and that. It wasn't even the next day. I think when I transferred the money, because I wasn't with him at the time, I sent him a message. It didn't go through, and I was like, what? So I tried to call him. This is literally as soon as I made the payment, bank transfer. I tried to call him, no response. And just something inside of me, I was just like, this isn't right. This isn't. Tried calling him. Within 10 minutes, I thought, I went straight to the bank. And I was like, I transferred. Well, my dad took me to the bank because I was too in like hysterics to drive. My dad took me to the bank, and I was like, I've literally transferred £3,000 10 minutes ago, and it's fraudulent. I want the payment to be stopped. I believe everything happens for a reason. It just happened that the person that I was talking to was a trainee. And he was like, I think if you've done a transfer in error, you have to wait 24 hours to report it. And I was like, what? I was like, listen to me. I've made a transaction to a fraudster. You need to freeze it. And he was like, and okay, I admit I was being really rude, but he was lucky that I was speaking to him. I didn't fucking punch him in the face. I was like, you need to freeze it now. So obviously I could tell he was a bit like, bitch. So he went to the back and he came back. He was like, yeah, you have to come in 24 hours. I was like, okay, whatever. Came the next day and then explained the situation to the cashier or whatever. She was like, why didn't you notify us as soon as you knew? And I was like, I did notify you as soon as I knew, but I was told to come back in 24 hours. So I started like proper kicking off. And my dad is literally my double. We, if it wasn't for me being female, wearing a hijab and being young, we're literally the same person. So I'm there talking and he's there talking, like we're both like just proper going off on it. The manager came. She was like, what happened? I was like, this and this and this happened, blah, 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 blah. She was like, who was it that advised you to come in 24 hours? And I was like, I don't know his name. My dad was like, his name was Matt. I was like, how do you know? She went, I looked at his name badge. I was like, why were you looking at people's name badge, Pev? Well, who does that? Well, I don't know. He did, which was to my advantage. I described him. They checked the CCTV and they saw that I came the day before.
Wow.
So I put in a complaint. Anyways, it did take 8 months, but eventually I got the 3,000 back. And I was like, oh my God, thank God, thank God, thank God. And my mum was like, do you know why you got that money back? She went, because you worked hard for your money. And when someone works hard for their money, it will never be taken away from them unfairly. And if it does, it will come back to them, whether it's in a week, in a month, in a year, in 10 years, in 100 years, it will come back to you in another form. Not necessarily, like she was like, not necessarily as cash or as diamonds or as gold, but maybe something amazing will happen to you that is worth that money, this and that. And that's the kind of mentality I have. So I truly believe if I put the work in, I always go back to that quote, it will always come back to you. You just don't know how, but it will.
Amazing. Wow.
That's just brought up like traumatic memories for no reason.
I was like, oh no, this sounds awful.
Worst feeling ever. That split second when you call that person and this line is no longer available, I just knew at that point he'd received the funds and just cut his, I just knew it. Yeah. Worst feeling ever.
I usually ask people what their biggest money mistake was, but I feel like you might have volunteered that information.
That was my biggest that's one of my biggest money mistakes. I bought a plot of land in Sudan when Sudan was economically more stable, but now it's really unstable. So it's just sitting there. I don't want to say that's a mistake, because maybe in 20 years, it gets to a better place, and but of trauma, because that land is still there. It's it's still under. I can build and I can do whatever I want. At least that's mine. Yeah. But that was my biggest.
Yeah.
Biggest.
Definitely. I'm curious about the land in Sudan. What is the long-term plan for that?
I don't know. I've always said I want my own house in Sudan, or but then I thought there's no point because we have a family house. But okay, you're going to think I'm going above and beyond with my plans, but I've always wanted to have job opportunities for other women in Sudan, and I really wanted to open like a domestic violence shelter. So women who experience like domestic violence and stuff, they know that there's a safe house that they can go to, and maybe even like convert part of it into offices for like a helpline, because it doesn't exist there. That is like my ultimate dream,
That is such a
to
cool
do that.
dream. That's incredible. I don't think that's
Yeah.
above and beyond at all. I think, well, for one thing, I'm very confident that you would be able to make that happen. And for another thing, I think that's incredible. What a cool
It's
idea.
it's something I've been with. So we like in Sudan, there's unfortunately, because funding cuts, there were a group of women that were funded by one of the universities in the Jazeera region to go to different villages and educate women about, making sure they finish their education, about the risks of FGM. There was amazing work being done, but unfortunately, funding, they don't even have proper healthcare. So funding's being cut for all these things. But that is something like I've tried to reintroduce, but I've attempted a few times, but as bad as it sounds, like without money nothing can be done, and you can't really depend on people's donations and stuff like that. You need something that is like a regular kind of thing. So I'm hoping once COVID is over, I've got plans and stuff to do charity gigs and stuff, and to try and raise money for these kind of causes, not just for that, but like there's a lot of areas in Sudan that don't have hospitals. Like the area where I come from, there's been a lot of deaths recently because there isn't like a local hospital. The nearest hospital is like an hour's drive away or whatever. So my dad's working on a project to build a hospital, but it's getting the finances. You can only give so much of your own. You need help from other people. So I've been in discussion with my dad about it, to do some charity gigs, because comedy, like a good night, people would pay for it, obviously. So yeah, I'm thinking of doing charity gigs to start raising money for these kind of things. We did raise money, we just like, send messages to people and be like, and it goes viral, and but there's so much GoFundMe's and this that you can do. You've actually got to make people want to pay for something in order to get it. Do you know what I mean? Like someone would rather come in to a music show or a comedy show and pay £20 rather than just give £20.
Totally.
You want to make sure that they got their money's worth, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What a cool, I think that's really incredible. And yeah, and how great also that you have these like comedy skills and also networks, like you can invite other people to come and give their time as well, and like do a whole like big charity night and stuff, and like actually that's so much more powerful financially than being, say, just like saving some of your income from your like salaried job, because there's so much more like scope for kind of going, okay, on this one night we are going to raise like £5,000 because we're going to have 400 people come and blah blah blah.
100%. 100%.
So
I think people think like, when people make big money, they just buy like lavish cars and do this and do that. And I think like if I didn't have any responsibilities, I think I would have done that. I think I would have splashed out on a really expensive car, because as a pharmacist, I make good, like not fantastic money, oh my god, but relatively good money. But I think people in my situation, I think a lot of people can understand this. Like if I see a car for, say, for example, 10,000, and there's another car that's not as good for 5,000, and a car that will get me from A to B for 3,000. My thing is like, I would rather get the 3,000 one, or even the 5,000 one at a push, because the other 5,000 can go towards something. So I think this is how like we are taught to think a lot of the times.
Well, when you start doing charity gigs, definitely let me know, because I'll share it with on our Instagram and
Oh, thank you. Yeah, but post COVID plan is to get started. Yeah, definitely.
I was wondering, so you were saying before, are you still based in Manchester, is that right?
Now I'm in Portsmouth now. I moved with COVID, yeah. So it was constant lockdown and I was really worried for my family and stuff, like being so far away. So I decided to move down, and was I living in Port? And I think at that time, when did I get flying? December. And I think at that time, like I wanted to get more gigs in London because I felt like, not in a big-headed way, but I've gigged in most places in Manchester by that time. Did the Frog, did the new slot at the Comedy Store. I did loads, and I was like, they say when you make it in London, that's when like it's.
Yeah.
So I really wanted more gigs in London. So it was like two birds with one stone, being close to my family. I literally live down the road from my mum and dad. And being close to London as well.
Right, because that's actually what I was going to ask you about building a career without living in London, and like, what are there any kind of extra considerations that you've had to have, or like, does it cost you more because you have to get into London to do stuff?
Yes, it does. Right now, financially, I couldn't live in London, and to be honest, I don't think I would. I want to be close to my parents. That's my number one priority. And I can't even deal with congestion charges, ULEZ. What the hell is ULEZ? And all this, I just can't deal with it. My anxiety is peaked in two situations. When someone is doing something wrong and they know they're doing something wrong, it just winds me up. And number two, looking for parking. I hate looking for parking. It really, really stresses me out.
Yeah.
So London for that reason, and I hate paying for parking. I hate it. It's like I pay enough insurance, I pay enough road tax, I pay enough MOT, servicing. What more can you possibly take from me? So that's why London's an absolute like headache. But then so expense wise, it is more expensive, and you have to consider that sometimes, like for example, I'll have a gig on Tuesday, and I do, coming up in June, I've got a gig in Tuesday in Up the Creek. So in my head, I've got to go up, do the gig, and come back to Portsmouth because I've got work the next day. So it's more expensive, but I feel like you can go further by doing stuff in London. I just feel that.
And well, I think it's true, because I think it's kind of set up that way. Like all of the hubs are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a short-term risk for long-term success. I've definitely made that up, but you get the gist.
Definitely. What is your I suppose we've talked about your huge financial goal of setting up all this support and infrastructure in Sudan. But what's your next financial goal? What would be the thing that you want to achieve kind of in the short to medium term?
I want my parents not to have to work and to live comfortably.
Oh,
that's I don't like saying it because I love my mum, but she obviously doesn't. She's not happy with my comedy, but she doesn't know that if you succeed in comedy, the money is good. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, but obviously the money, you can't lie. Like if you do start doing really well, then that's fine. Then that's like a bonus. But essentially that's what I want to do. This sounds so cliche, but our families did leave their families for us to have a better life. And they've sacrificed a lot. They've lost so many people, and they haven't been there when that has happened. So our families have literally given us everything that they could. And if I can even give a fraction, just literally like a hairline fracture of what my parents gave to me, it would make me the happiest person ever. And that's why I'm like pushing through everything, pushing through like dealing with work, dealing with COVID, dealing with like all the losses back home, just pushing to achieve, you know, like getting to a point where I can be successful, that my parents don't have to worry about, oh, I've got to give them notice to take time off work. No, I don't want them to have to work. I want them to be able to be at a place where they're happy. They can fly back to Sudan whenever they want to. They know that they can come back and not have to worry about ticket prices and this prices and that prices. I want them to be able to not have to go around and, you know, ask different people in our community, can you please donate because uncle Hatim needs another heart surgery, and because that's what's happening. People in Sudan, in my family, are dying because they can't afford. There's no medical care. There's only certain hospitals that do certain things, but their prices are ridiculous. So I want to get to a stage where my parents don't have to worry about these things. That's my ultimate aim. It's not for me to get a new Porsche or for me to get a Brazilian butt lift or to get a food job. No, like if my family are happy, I will be 100% happy. Even if my quality of life that I'm living now is the same, doesn't change at all, but there's improved, that will make me so happy, like really happy.
That's incredible. I almost cried. It was very moving.
I almost bloody cried, but I don't want to look like a little bitch on your...
Oh, oh, that's amazing. Well, I really hope that you get there. And
oh, thanks, mate.
on with the trajectory that you're going on. I'm so confident that you will, because I think just the more you do, the more, as you said, the more stuff is going to come back to you. And I think
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, this has been a very offloading podcast. I feel like I've got a lot off my chest.
Oh, well, lovely. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy that you could come on and tell your story, and and definitely keep us posted about any of the charity stuff and all that kind of thing, because I'm sure people will be really keen to get behind it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Artists Make Money podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Artists Make Money, where you can also sign up for our weekly newsletter for a dose of financial artistic advice. You can find me on Twitter at Vivienne41, and you'll find Ola on Instagram and Twitter at the Ola Labib. That is OLALABIB. The music for this podcast was composed by Tiiva. You can find them at Tiiva Music, Tiiva. If you enjoyed the show, I would love it if you would give it a follow or share it with a friend, or write a review or give it a rating in Apple Podcasts. Being an artist is hard, and making a living from it is even harder, but I believe in you. Keep going.